Hi, and welcome to Lecture 2, The Ancient Near East. So this all is in Unit 1, Prehistory, Ancient Near East, Egypt, and the Aegean Greeks. For today's set of lectures, we're just going to do the first three. And next week we'll start with the Aegean Greeks, Classical Greece, the Romans, which also runs into Unit 2. So the ancient Near East, basically, as you can tell by this map, is basically is what today we would call the Middle East, Turkey, Israel, Egypt, Lebanon, Syria, Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Iran, right? Kuwait, Syria. No, I did say Syria. I'm probably missing something. Armenia, etc. So it's the central part of it, basically modern day Iraq and Iran, where we focus mostly. But because all of these cultures we're going to talk about in this slideshow pretty much are in the Iran-Iraq area. A few are up here. So, again, I'm going to go through as quickly as I can, but stop at the really important stuff. So, for the Sumerians, religion is really important, but then when you get to the Akkadians and the Assyrians, it's not important. So, it actually shifts the way art looks as well. So, what happens during the ancient Near East is some of these settlements become cities, and some of these cities become polises, which is kind of a city, a mini kingdom, if you want. And then some of these polises become entire civilizations, and eventually some become kingdoms, empires, etc. So what happens is you have, in order for something to be a civilization, you have to have a city, or several cities with permanent constructions, a system of government, a class system, so from working class to wealthy to, and generally in the ancient world, a priestly class that was the highest class. There has to be some kind of production of goods being made, selling of goods, trading of goods, that kind of stuff. And then there has to be a written communication system, of course. And also generally, most of the time, a shared system of religious belief. So again, we're not going to go through all of these. You are still responsible for them. They are still up there. I just want to stop at the really important stuff and kind of explain it. Let me see. Make sure. Okay, so I do want you to kind of know the area we're talking about. Part of that area is called the Fertile Crescent. That's this green area in here. And it's because originally, and that's really important, originally, this area was very fertile and could grow all kinds of crops. Along the Nile River, it's still sort of fertile. Pretty much in the rest of this area, it's really not. It's basically become desertification is the fancy word. And that's because, obviously, our ancient ancestors didn't know about crop rotation, didn't know properly how to irrigate, and they basically farmed the land to death. I'm trying to get my pointer up. Okay, so the area that we're focusing on at the beginning is this tiny little area circled here in red, as you can see, circled here in red, that's called Sumer. So Sumer, not summer, there's only one M, is the first area that civilization had popped up. So what's really important about Sumer is it's not the first nation, so don't get that wrong on a test. It is the first civilization, but it's not the first nation. It's the first civilization. What's that mean? Why is that different, right? So all those little dots you see on the map here, okay, so Nippur, Isin, Adab, Umma, etc., right? All these little dots you see on the map were individual city-states, which means the city and the area surrounding it were ruled by one person. Never did all of this red area get together and have one ruler, so it never became a nation. But the king of Umma, the king of Adab, the king of Nippur, but they were all still Sumerian. They spoke Sumerian, they wrote Sumerian, they worshipped the Sumerian gods. So they all spoke and did the same things and had the same culture, but they never unified, not during the Sumerian period, right? So what did the Sumerians do since they were the first people? They invented the wheel, obviously means they invented the pottery wheel. Most important for us, they invented writing, and that writing is called cuneiform, definitely a test question. And the first book ever written, also a test question. There's no quiz, don't worry about it. Is the Epic of Gilgamesh. Right? It's the first literary work. Actually, there is a quiz, but I don't think it's due next week. So it's the first book ever written. So then we have other important things that happened. And again, like I said, I'm not going to stop everywhere. However, the Sumerians could eventually come together in what's called the Neo-Sumerian Dynasty. So they do get one king for that whole area, but it's only after they were conquered by the Akkadians. So the whole area, because they had individual little kingdoms, was easy to conquer. Another group of people came by, conquered them, and then eventually they figured, hey, if we get together, maybe we'll be stronger. And they were, and they won. And then you have the Babylonians. Now, there are two sets of Babylonians. I guess this is important for me to kind of tell you. Two sets of Babylonians. The first Babylonians are, I guess you could say, the good Babylonians, depending on, how religious you are. And those Babylonians are the ones who developed the first set of laws, developed advanced math, the number 0, early algebra, and stuff like that. They're not the Babylonians they talk about in the Bible. So if you're a religious person and you've read the Bible and God is mad at the Babylonians and God is going to punish the Babylonians and God is going to get even with the Babylonians, it's not this group of Babylonians. We'll get there in a second. Eventually, all of these different groups get conquered. The alphabet, in case I ask, is created actually in Syria. It's not quite the same. I think it has 20 letters instead of 26, but it's the same kind of alphabet we use. Then the next big group is the Assyrians. And the Assyrians are like the Akkadians. They're conquerors, and they conquer a bunch of different areas. And then you have these Babylonians. So these Babylonians, who are called the Neo-Babylonians, are the ones that the Bible's talking about. Now, they didn't call themselves Babylonians. They called themselves Chaldeans. But the Bible calls them Babylonians because when the Chaldeans conquered Israel, Egypt and Israel, and then took over the city of Jerusalem, and then rounded up all the Jews and brought them back to the city of Babylon, where they became slaves, the Jews assumed, since they were in the city of Babylon, the people who conquered them were Babylonians. So in the Bible, when they're talking about God's going to get even with the Babylonians and the Babylonians are evil, it's this group of Babylonians because they're the ones who conquered the Jews and destroyed the Temple of Solomon, the one that held the Ten Commandments and the Ark of the Covenant and Moses' stick, all that stuff. These are the guys who destroyed it the first time. And then the last group in the ancient Near East is the Persian Empire, which had the largest empire in the world at that particular time. So anytime you see a red word in our PowerPoints, know that that red word is a test question. Always. And most of the time, 99 out of 100, it's just a definition. So polytheism is belief in more than one god. Monotheism, belief in only one god. So all of the ancient Near Eastern civilizations were polytheistic. All of them had more than one god. The only exception was the Jews, but the Jews came later. I don't mean they came later. I mean they came to monotheism later. The early Jews were also polytheistic and believed in more than one god. It's later that they developed monotheism. And you can actually see that happen in the Bible if you pay attention a couple of times. One is in the first commandment, right? Thou shalt not have any other gods before me. Well, if there's only one God, you don't need a commandment that says don't have any others. And then you can also, if you remember when Moses goes up to Mount Sinai and gets the Ten Commandments and comes down, the Jews are worshiping another god, right? And he gets really mad, whole 9 yards. All of the ancient Near Eastern civilizations, however, including the Jews, were theocracies, which is a government led by religious leaders in some way, shape, or form, right? It's a government form that's basically gone. There's only, I think, 2 or maybe 3 theocracies left in the world. One is Iran, the other is Indonesia, and the third one, of course, that everybody knows, I would assume, is the Vatican, run by the Pope. And I know we always think of the Vatican as a religious place, but it's also a country, right? It has its own army, its own money, so it's a theocracy. So the Sumerians had several gods, and we'll talk about this. So the Sumerians had several gods. They were called the Anunnaki. That's just all of the gods are called the Anunnaki, which just means those who come from Anu. And Anu is the king of the gods. So on a test, I'm not going to make you name the gods, but I would probably, no, I will have like Anu, Abu, Enlil. Who are they? Whose gods are they? Who do they belong to? And you'll say, okay, the Sumerian. But in case you didn't know, the Assyrians, Babylonians, Akkadians, and Hittites all worshiped these same gods. They sometimes changed the name to their local dialect, but basically they all worshipped the same gods. So Inanna sometimes, especially in Assyrian language and Babylonian language, is actually called Ishtar. You may be familiar with that name more so than Inanna. And that's all the Sumerian gods. The Persians are the only ones that are unique in this sense, other than the Jews, which we'll get to much later, and that they, instead of having a bunch of gods, they only have two. And one is a good god, one is kind of a bad god, god of light, god of darkness. But in the religion, both gods are equally powerful, even though in the end, in their holy book, which is called the Zendavesta, basically the Bible, right? And Zoroaster, who's basically their Jesus, right? In the end, the good god will win, but before the end, both gods are equally powerful. So there's no, the good is always going to win. Bad is going to win sometimes. It's kind of how they explain bad things happening to good people. What happens with cultures and countries that have more than one god is generally, almost all the time, the magic number system kicks in. So this is something you're going to see in all religions, including Christianity and Judaism and whatever, is that there's a magic number system. Those magic numbers are always the same. It's 3, it's 7, it's 12, and it's 40. You're going to see those numbers appear again and again and again and again in every major religion, especially if it has more than one god, but even, like I said, in Judaism, Christianity. So with the Sumerian gods, there's 12 most important gods. 12 is important, right? And then within the 12, there's 3 that are the best, and that's Anu, Enlil, and Enki. Those are the 3 top gods. And then again, like those said, those magic numbers are going to pop up again and again and again. And again, it appears in other cultures. So, onward to art. So Sumerian art is, because they're very religious people, focused on religion, right? So because it's focused on religion, you're not going to get anyone caring much about details. And that's what happens whenever art shifts towards religion. So if you think of the Middle Ages and how bad art is in the Middle Ages, it's a period of religion. Now, the reason it's bad, both in the Sumerian and the Middle Ages, is not because they wanted it to be bad. It's because it doesn't matter what stuff looks like. What matters is you understand the meaning of the stuff you're looking at. So everything kind of has a formal format. So all of the all of the Sumerian art, everyone's got big eyes, everyone's got a giant arched eyebrow, everyone's body shape is kind of like a Pringles can. Humans aren't individual, they all kind of look the same. All of the artwork is focused on giving, praying to the gods and focus on the gods and honor to the gods, and the famous word here, homage to the gods. And it's basically abstract for the most part and not natural or detailed, because the focus is on spirituality and the afterlife. So it does not matter how good it is. So we're not going to have a lot of Sumerian art, but we do have some, so you can kind of get the idea. This is what their temples would have looked like, more or less. We do have one that's in fairly good shape. This is the Ziggurat of Er. Test question again. The oldest existing code of laws was actually made by the guy who made this temple. His name is Ur-Nammu. This is that other temple and what it should look like. So this is what I mean. Big eyes. You can't see them because they've been torn out because they were probably made of some kind of precious jewel or something. But you can see the arched eyebrow I was talking about, right? This gigantic arch, kind of like a McDonald's sign on everybody's head, right? Almost. And that appears throughout all of their artwork. So again, the arched eyebrow, which you can barely see on both of these, but trust me, it's there, and the big prominent eyes. So all of the male statues look like this. All of the female statues basically look like this. These are kind of votive statues. Votive is a fancy word for offering. So if anybody's Catholic, and I'm assuming that there are some Catholics in the room, those are the same things as those candles you light in the church. And you put the money in, the candle lights up. That's a votive offering. It's the same thing. So these would have been bought. Somebody would have wrote a prayer on it. Here, this space, you can see the space where the writing would go, right? And then it would have been brought to the gods as an offering. So stuff to be careful. This is the masterpiece of Sumerian art. It's not the masterpiece of the ancient Near East. Don't confuse those two questions. So the masterpiece of Sumerian art is the Standard of Er. It is a two-sided thing. This is the front, which is war, during war. The king, obviously the biggest guy in the picture, right? Underneath all of the chariots is a dead guy. That's not because they killed people and then ran over them with their horses. In art, you're going to see this a lot. When you conquer your enemy, you're on top of them. So this obviously isn't what really is going to happen, because obviously if the horse kept going, yeah, the horse can jump over the dead body, but the chariot's not going to, and all these guys are going to fall out of the chariot, right? So the second row is capturing the enemy and bringing them, and then finally bringing them to the king. The king is seeing the enemy brought to him. You'll notice the king is bigger than everyone else, because in ancient art, the more important you are, the larger you're going to be, especially with ancient Near East and Egyptian art. So obviously this poor guy here, whose job is to bring the horses in, he was not a dwarf, he was just not important, so he's tiny, right? The enemies are smaller than the soldiers, right? All of those kind of things are playing into it. So the back of it is actually showing you during times of peace. So it's kind of like a war and a peacetime. So the farmers are farming and herding their sheep and their thing. And the priests and the king are sitting basically partying. Everyone's got a cup. And yes, the Sumerians drank only one thing, and it was beer. So they all have a cup of beer. There's music going on. This guy's got the fire going behind the king to keep the king warm. But you'll notice the king is sitting down and still taller than the people standing up, because he's more important than everyone else. There's another one of those works of art from that period. And then we jump to the other people, the Akkadians, the Neo-Samarians Babylonians. So their artwork is going to be a little bit different because these cultures are a little bit different. For example, the Akkadians and the Assyrians in particular are warrior cultures. And you'll see this happen a lot with warrior cultures too. The art is meant to show off how cool they are, how great they are, what amazing warriors they are, how great their king is, how great their generals are. So it is more important to look like you really look, or at least close. Obviously, if you're a warrior culture, you portray more violence. Obviously, if you're a warrior culture, you're glorifying the military power of your people. So the Assyrians and Akkadians, even though they're two different cultures, the answer for your test question, which they are separate, what's Akkadian art and what's Assyrian art character, it would be the same answer. Again, remember, you only need two. So here's one of the Akkadian kings. They think it's Sargon, who's the first king of the Akkadians, who has this really cool, interesting story. He was born in secret. He was the child of a rich priestly family, but because his family was going to be killed, they put the kid in a basket, put him in a river. He was discovered and raised by the new royal family as one of their kids, and eventually took over and became the king. This is his son, Naram-Sin. And again, you'll notice right away who the king is in this picture, because look how much bigger he is than everyone else, right? He's also wearing a crown, but he's much bigger than everyone else, so it's obvious. He's already killed one of his enemies. The other enemy's begging, please don't kill me. Here's his soldiers coming up the mountain to fight. But of course, the thing is kind of like saying the king did it by himself. But we all know that in the ancient world, and even in the modern world, the generals and the kings and the rulers don't fight. They send people in, right? Let's see, what else do I need to stop? Okay, so Code of Hammurabi is the next one. There are several of these. This is the best one, the one in the best condition. So Hammurabi was a king of Babylon, the good Babylon, not the bad Babylon, who, he still, I guess, was bad to some people because he still went around and conquered, right? Who once he conquered a place, actually put up this code of laws so that everyone knew the laws and everyone understood the laws, so that everyone had the same laws. Rich, poor, didn't matter, right? So here's the whole set. That's what's written here. You can't obviously read cuneiform, but trust me. So it starts off with the story of how he got the laws, which basically eliminated anyone ever being able to challenge them. So according to Hammurabi, he went up to the mountain, talked to the god Shamash. Shamash handed him 2 stone tablets with the laws on them. He came down, put the stone tablets away, and copied the laws for everyone to see. And then every place he conquered, he put the laws so that everywhere that Babylon was in charge of, the same laws applied. So his are the first complete code of laws. We have every single one of those laws. What you do with cows, what you do with stores, laws of inheritance, everything. There's some fun ones, obviously. The Hittites, and then the Persians. So let me see what I want to give you. The Assyrians, I don't know if I want to. Not, again, just because I'm not stopping doesn't mean it won't show up on a test. It just means I want to focus more time on the other stuff. So the next big one is the masterpiece of all the ancient Near East. And it's not just this one that you're seeing here. So it's a whole panel, some 300 feet long, of a relief sculpture of the different Assyrian kings fighting lions. Right, the kings and the princes. So you can see there's a bunch of dead lions, right, and a hunt going on. A lion underneath the horse. Again, same thing. I've conquered my enemy, not because obviously the king's going to fall off the horse. And the whole series, the hunting reliefs themselves are the masterpiece. So Ashurbanipal hunting lions isn't the name of the masterpiece. The name of the masterpiece is the hunting reliefs, right? So actually, I think this last one, yeah, no, that's not part of it. Okay, so the next big one that we're going to stop at and talk about a little bit is the Ishtar Gate. Remember, Ishtar is Inanna, one of the gods. The city of Babylon had some 30 some odd gates, 33, I believe, and then 8 big ones kind of where you would defend the city from. So there was 8 big ones and then 33 little ones after going through the first 8 ones. And this is basically, they would have put the, archers at the top, and, shot at people as they tried to come in. This is huge, by the way, in case you're like, how big is this? Like, Shaquille O'Neal's probably this tall. Sorry, right about there. They actually took this apart and put it back together in a museum. It's actually what they did, which is crazy. So the last big thing is the Achaemenid Palace, which is in Persepolis, which again today is Iran, but ancient Persia. It's not, obviously you can see by looking at it, there's not much left of this palace. You can also sort of, though, however, get an idea how big it must have been. Unfortunately, Alexander the Great destroyed it. And he did so basically intentionally, because the Persians had destroyed the Acropolis. So Alexander the Great, 150 years later, not having anything to do with the destruction of the Acropolis or remembering even it, because it was 150 years later, decided this was finally the chance to get even for the Persians destroying the Acropolis, and told his soldiers, this is go nuts. Destroy everything you see in sight, knock everything over. And they did. The stuff you see standing up has been re-stood up in modern times. So none of those columns were up. None of these gates and doors and whatever were up. Those were all put up in modern times. Again, you can't really see in this picture. I wish you could see how big it is, but you might. If you look back here, you can kind of see people. So you can kind of get an idea just how big the whole palace complex was. Here's some of the columns. These people are 8 feet tall, just so you can get an idea. So these people are taller than the sculpture, taller than normal people. Again, size, always important for these people. The king is huge. This is Shapur I, who defeated the Roman Emperor Valerian, who's basically begging for his life here, which he didn't get. He cut off his head and sent it back to Rome. Okay, so that should end this section. And then we will finally finish with Egypt as our last section.